You've been told that 70 is the new 50. That retirement is the time to finally cash in those miles and see the world on your own terms. And honestly, most of the time, that's true. But there is a massive, dangerous lie floating around the travel industry right now. The idea that every bucket list destination is ready for a solo traveler with a few extra decades of wisdom and maybe a slightly slower gait. It's not just about crime, it's about the invisible dangers. We're talking about crumbling infrastructure that turns a simple stroll into a hip fracture, or a medical system that requires a cash bribe before they'll even look at your insurance card. I've spent the last 15 years as an international security consultant, the guy embassies call when things go sideways, and I've seen exactly how fast a dream trip can turn into a nightmare when you're a silver-haired target in the wrong zip code. You see, the vulture culture in certain cities is real. Criminals in these spots don't see a sophisticated traveler. They see a payday with slower reflexes. They're betting on the fact that you're carrying a high-limit credit card and that you won't chase them down an alley. But it gets worse. It's not just the pickpockets you have to worry about. It's the fact that in these 5 cities, the very environment is designed to fail you the moment you step off the beaten path. If you think a fancy hotel in a bad city makes you safe, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Safety isn't a lobby with a doorman, it's the 3 blocks surrounding it. Stick with me, because what I'm about to tell you flies in the face of every glossy travel brochure you've seen in the last decade. If you value your independence and your life, you need to hear this. Before we get into the first city, do me a quick favor. If you believe that traveling solo after 70 is an act of courage that deserves the right preparation, hit that subscribe button. I'm here to make sure you keep traveling until you're 100, but only if you're smart about it. Now, let's talk about the marvelous city that is anything but marvelous for a solo senior. Rio de Janeiro is a masterpiece of geography. You've seen the photos of Christ the Redeemer and the sweeping curves of Copacabana. But here's the secret the influencers won't tell you. Rio is currently experiencing a surge in arrastão, or dragnet robberies. This isn't a guy sneaking a wallet. It's a flash mob of youth swarming a beach or a sidewalk, grabbing everything in sight. For a solo traveler over 70, this is a physical catastrophe waiting to happen. If you're caught in one of these swarms, the risk isn't just losing your watch, it's being knocked to the pavement. At 25, you bounce back. At 75, a fall on a concrete boardwalk in a foreign country is a life-altering event. But it's not just the street crime. Rio's geography is a vertical maze. The sidewalks in the historic areas are often uneven, Portuguese pavement, beautiful to look at, but a literal death trap for anyone who isn't 100% sure-footed. And if you do take a spill? The private hospitals are excellent, but getting to one through Rio's legendary gridlocked traffic can take over an hour. In a medical emergency, that's an hour you don't have. Now you might be asking, can't I just stay in the high-end zones like Ipanema? Here's the kicker. The wealth gap in Rio is so compressed that the most dangerous neighborhoods, the favelas, often sit directly above the most expensive hotels. The safety bubble you think you're buying doesn't actually exist. But as risky as Rio is, the next city on my list makes Brazil look like a playground. We're heading to a place where the infrastructure hasn't just aged. It has completely collapsed, and the security is often part of the problem. If you thought the chaos in Rio was a one-off, you're in for a reality check. Because we're moving from the marvelous city to a place that looks like a paradise on a postcard, but hides a jagged edge that targets the vulnerable. Welcome to Johannesburg, South Africa. Or, as the locals call it, Joburg. Now, I know what you're thinking. But I've seen the luxury safari tours that start there. And you're right, the gated communities in suburbs like Sandton are some of the most opulent on the planet. But here is where the security theater gets dangerous for a solo traveler over 70. You are lulled into a false sense of security by the 10-foot walls and electric fences. The second you step outside that green zone to explore a local market or take a photo of some historic architecture, you are entering a world of trio crimes. That's security speak for house robberies, business robberies, and carjackings. In Joburg, these aren't just statistics, they are a daily reality. For a senior traveler, the biggest threat isn't just the crime itself, it's the aggressive nature of it. We're seeing a massive spike in smash and grabs at traffic lights. If you're in a rental car or an Uber and you have your phone or bag on your lap, you are a target. And let's be real. If someone smashes your window with a spark plug at 40 miles per hour, the shock alone can trigger a cardiac event. This isn't just about your wallet, it's about your heart rate. But it gets worse. Let's talk about the medical backup. South Africa has some world-class private hospitals, but the public system is under immense strain. If you're solo and something goes wrong, you better hope your paperwork is perfect and your gold standard travel insurance is accessible the second you hit the ER. Otherwise, you're looking at a bureaucratic nightmare while you're in a state of crisis. Here's the secret no one tells you. The safety in Joburg is entirely dependent on your ability to never, ever be alone. And for a solo traveler, that defeats the whole purpose of the trip, doesn't it? Now, you might be asking, is there anywhere that's actually worse? Unfortunately, yes. We're crossing the Atlantic to a city that has effectively fallen off the map of functioning society. If Joburg is a security theater, then Caracas, Venezuela, is a full-blown survival horror. Look, I'm going to be blunt. If you are over 70 and traveling solo, you have absolutely no business being in Caracas in 2026. The U.S. State Department has this at a level 4, do not travel, and for good reason. The embassy has literally packed up and left. If you get into trouble, if you're detained, if you're injured, or if you're a victim of an express kidnapping, there is no 911. There is no Uncle Sam coming to bail you out. But the real hidden killer here for seniors is the infrastructure collapse. We're talking about a city where power outages are frequent and the water supply is hit or miss. Imagine being in a hotel elevator when the grid goes down, or trying to manage your medication in a place where the local pharmacy hasn't seen a shipment of basic antibiotics in months. In my 15 years in this business, I've seen people think they can outplan a failing state. You can't. In Caracas, vulture culture has been replaced by a predator economy. Criminals watch the airport routes like hawks, waiting for anyone who looks like they have hard currency. And as a solo senior, you are the highest value, lowest risk target on their radar. I know this sounds heavy, but stick with me. We've covered the infrastructure trap and the security theater. But the next city on our list is perhaps the most heartbreaking because it's a place many seniors feel a deep cultural connection to, only to find out it's become a hotspot for a very specific kind of violence. We've looked at the chaos of Rio and the high-walled tension of Johannesburg. But as we move into the final 2 cities on this list, we're shifting from crime hotspots to places where the danger is a bit more deceptive. The 4th city you need to cross off your solo list is Nairobi, Kenya. Now, I love East Africa. The people are some of the most welcoming on earth. But there's a reason the locals themselves often call their capital Nairobi. For a solo traveler over 70, Nairobi presents a very specific physical threat: the boda boda culture. In Nairobi, the traffic is so gridlocked that everyone jumps on the back of small motorcycles to get around. For a younger traveler, it's a thrill. For you, it's a recipe for a shattered tibia. These bikes weave through lanes with zero regard for safety, and pedestrian crossings are treated as mere suggestions. If you decide to walk, you're dealing with swarmer pickpockets. These aren't just guys reaching for a wallet. They are highly coordinated groups that will bump into you, create a commotion, and have your passport and phone gone before you've even regained your balance. At 70, that kind of physical contact isn't just a nuisance, it's a fall risk. And in a city where the sidewalks are often missing or crumbling into open drainage ditches, one wrong step is all it takes to end your trip in a crowded, under-resourced clinic. But it gets even more intense when we look at our final destination, a city that used to be the gold standard for luxury. Acapulco, Mexico. If you're of a certain age, you remember Acapulco as the playground of Frank Sinatra and Elvis. It was the epitome of glamour. But today, Acapulco has the highest homicide rate in Mexico. The tourist zone that used to protect travelers has effectively dissolved. The danger here is spillover violence. You could be sitting at a beautiful waterfront restaurant, minding your own business, and find yourself in the middle of a cartel turf war. These groups are fighting for control of the port, and they don't care who is in the crossfire. Worse yet, nature hasn't been kind. Since the devastation of Hurricane Otis, the infrastructure in Acapulco is a ghost of its former self. Many of the luxury hotels are still operating with skeleton crews and compromised security systems. You are paying for a 5-star experience but getting a 2-star security reality. As a solo senior, you are essentially a lighthouse in a dark sea for local gangs who know the police are stretched too thin to help you. So, does this mean you should just stay home and watch the Travel Channel? Absolutely not. The secret isn't to stop traveling, it's to pivot to what I call high-trust destinations. If you want the culture of Rio without the dragnet robberies, look at Lisbon, Portugal. It has the hills and the history, but it's consistently ranked as one of the safest countries in the world. If you want the bustling energy of a world-class city without the robbery street scams, go to Kyoto, Japan. You can walk the streets at 3 a.m. with a bag of cash, and the only thing that will happen is someone might chase you down to return a glove you dropped. The goal of your 70s and 80s should be adventure without anxiety. You've earned the right to see the world, but you've also earned the right to not have to look over your shoulder every 10 seconds. Now, identifying the dangerous cities is only half the battle. The real trick is knowing how to senior-proof your gear before you even leave the driveway. I've put together a specialized checklist of the 5 specific pieces of anti-vulture gear that I personally recommend for solo travelers over 70, including a piece of tech that can alert your family and local authorities if you take a fall, even if you're unconscious. Do you want to see the list?